Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome back to another Arduin review. I hope you guys are having a great Friday, and I hope you guys have some big plans to get some gaming in, especially with Monday being a holiday for lots of folks, especially us. We'll probably get to have maybe 2 whole game nights between now and then. This is Book 5, the Arduin Grimoire, Dark Dreams. I read it last week, and I was skimming through it again this morning just to bone up on it. And, once again, it's a quality version of the Arduin books. The printing and the binding and the covers are just top notch, guys. Thanks again, George. Hopefully I'll get to talk to you this weekend. As my dog tries to make a guest appearance, but as you know, his contract hasn't been renegotiated. But let's start off. I wanted to show this picture because, well, actually that one too. That's just top notch, creepy. Got that Cthulhu look to it. And then there was another picture I just saw that, for the longest time, I'd always wondered about Deitins and wondered where they came from, and realized, having read The Dying Earth by Jack Vance, that's in fact where they come from. And to be honest, I actually like David A Hargrave's new interpretation of them, although it was quite some years ago. But that's a Deodint, and even though it's black and white and it should be reversed, because they have really, really dark black skin, it just makes me want to run one all the more. They were always really, terrifying growing up, and having them in games. But this makes them all the more terrifying because it gives them more of an intelligence, an intelligent look to them, as they, seem to actually be less wild and more streamlined killers than just, a step up from zombies and ghouls. But I just wanted to show you guys that picture because I think I actually have that miniature somewhere. I hope I do, because I really want to paint it, and hopefully I can do it justice. But let's get on with the actual review. I'm going to go over the table of contents if I can find my bookmark here. Here we go. Just to give you guys an idea of what you can expect from this book. Admittedly, it wasn't my favorite so far, but it had some stuff in it that I really think you guys will appreciate. I'm further along. I'm actually on book 8 now, I think, with my reread this time around. But the first chapter, I think a lot of people could benefit from, but then again, I think a lot of other people have have lost so many characters that they're past it. But it's called Death in Arduin, and I remember growing up, characters were either a dime a dozen or they were precious, and losing a character to death is not fun, especially after having played them for any amount of time other than a one shot or a couple of nights, and okay, I'm dead, all right, I'll make a new character. But he had a lot of advice, especially for newer and I want to say younger players, because even though a lot of kids back in the day really were pretty young playing this game, I think nowadays younger players would have a lot harder time with losing a character, even after a single night. But I think everybody should reread that chapter again. Then there was the next chapter, the Fog of War, or what the heck is going on. And I think everybody is guilty of the sins mentioned in this chapter, that being, especially with miniatures and things like that. It talks about how you basically you got to play in character and not know what you know. When one of your friends is going down, their hit points are low, your character doesn't, or probably wouldn't, because of the noise of battle, the clanging of steel, the shouts and war cries left and right. Your buddy's going down. He's down to 2 hit points, but you're facing off with 2 orcs, and the players will rush to help the other wounded character, which literally should end with everybody getting stabbed from attacks of opportunity, and being able to hear when you can't hear, and things like that. Another, you know, great chapter of advice that I think everybody could benefit from. Then the next chapter was Street Gangs of Arduin, which I really enjoyed. Uh, Having read a lot of Sherlock Holmes and read a lot of other classic novels, uh, the Artful Dodger and the Baker Street Irregulars come to mind. But in Arduin, they would all be on crack or meth or steroids or something, because they're a lot more brutal and a lot less PG friendly when it comes to the harsh realities of, living on the streets and living without parents. The Lord of the Flies comes to mind. If you guys have read that book, you might know what I'm talking about, where, children left unattended to fend for themselves would be quite brutal and vicious and, sad, honestly. It was almost heartbreaking to read the chapter, thinking of what it would be like, if such a thing was, you know, a real thing here in the States, or, in other places. Well, I realize in other countries that actually might be a thing. I'm not really sure. But if you're going to have your street urchins and things like that ever be a part of, your town adventures, this is definitely a good chapter to get through and think about it. The next chapter was Checkmate, how to have your characters game among themselves. When your characters or your players are, at your local tavern playing a game of darts or even billiards or pool or something like that, which I think really needs to come back into barroom fights and tavern encounters. I played a lot of pool growing up, and I wish I had a pool table at the moment, but I really don't have the room for it. But that's another story. I think having your characters game amongst themselves or engage in games of chance, cards, chess, checkers, backgammon, whatever. I think that's actually a bit more refreshing than the usual, get drunk, get into a fight, spend the night in jail. That is so cliche and common amongst, you know, tavern encounters, and I would like to see more of that. So this chapter gives you ways to roll those encounters out without actually having to play cards or throw some darts, break up the game. It simplifies it but makes it enjoyable enough to give you the outcome, as well as the feel of a quick game. Although I definitely think bringing out a deck of Swords and Dragons during a game might not be a bad idea, especially, have your players play a couple of games of that as opposed to maybe Magic the Gathering or something like that, which would be, completely out of character. While they're waiting for you to set up, drop a deck of Swords and Dragons out and say, all right, whoever wins the game, gets this, gets first crack at the munchies, something like that, or, during the middle of a game, there's a big game of Swords and Dragons going on, the pot's pretty big, and you guys are all low on cash, you ante up, and let's see what happens. The next couple of chapters are actually, a 50-50 with me. Well, the first one is infamous, Black Metals of Arduin and other mythical metals of Arduin. Most games usually only have like one mythical metal, and here he goes on with, I want to say at least 10 different kinds of metals. And unless you're really going to, replace, other kinds of metals or really utilize them, to some great extent, nearby forges, or this dungeon has this particular forge inside it, and that's where they make this kind of metal. It could just bog the players down and kind of bore them, or it could be really interesting, searching for the equivalent of mithril, which I always, that was always my fallback metal for the rarest of the rare, because everybody could identify with it, unless you come up with a really easy to pronounce metal name and make something about it really spectacular. or simple to understand. I think it could just, you know, cloud the story. You know, like a lot of history that some dungeon masters you know plunk down in front of your players. Okay, read this history and then we'll get playing. Nobody really appreciates that except the dungeon master as he's writing it. So unless you can sneak it in here and there sparingly, I think you might want to just read through it, grab a couple of the medals, and just stick with 3 to 5 of them, as opposed to here's 20 different kinds of metal that are common here. Then the next chapter is Silks of Arachnid Origins, which, just like the previous chapters, I think could bog the game down, or you know just complicate things. Telling someone it's spider silk rope, that usually covers it, and they're like, oh, okay, it's not magical, but it's still kind of cool. Uh, I realized that some of these different types of silks have quasi mystical powers, like being fireproof and things like that. You know, in most cases, unless you get hit with a fireball while rappelling down a cliffside or something like that, most rope isn't going to burn up that fast. I know having tried to set rope on fire for various reasons, don't ask. It's not as easy as you might think. It's got an exterior density or toughness that having actually fallen during mountain climbing, I know the kind of friction and heat that it takes to really weaken a good piece of rope. Now if it's crummy rope, then maybe not so much, but buyer beware. Then on to alchemy and gameplay. Orc alchemy, 2 chapters I'm going to combine. The different types of alchemical products available in Arduin are a nice way to give out magical items and gadgets and gizmos before you really want to give them something really heavy duty, especially levels 1 through 4. But once you pass that point, maybe rely, having characters rely on the same old, mixture or potion or whatever, it is good for, like trademarking and having your signature and things like that, but more often than not, I find my characters, they stick to the healing potions and maybe fire resistance potions, and that's about all they care about. Every once in a while, a giant strength potion or a treasure finding potion, which is really just a way to justify the characters being able to find the treasure that you hid in the dungeon or the wilderness, just in case they don't make their rolls. So it's not as spectacular as players might think. And then Orc Alchemy, which is not just a funny chapter because trying to drink an orc potion when you're not an orc, even if you are an orc, potentially gagging and retching up the potion that you desperately need to take, is kind of humorous when you think about it. But I think it's more useful to beef up your said orcs so that they're all not just 1 to 8 hit points. Okay, it's dead. 1 to 8 hit points, it's dead. Giving not just your chieftains or sub leaders or things like that, a few extra hit points, but really beefing them up, which in reality I think a lot of the lesser monsters in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons were just too weak, especially when you throw in the weapon specialization. That's why almost every monster I run gets about 1 to 3 extra hit points per hit die, just because of the weapon specialization rules from the Unearthed Arcana just made them, just paper targets, just like football players rushing through that homecoming sign. It offered no resistance, and then when fighters get an attack per level against 1 hit die creatures, you got a 5th level character, lopping his way through 5 orcs, goblins, or kobolds per melee round. Throwing 100 at them doesn't seem like a stretch after those rules come into play. So giving orcs, access to a lot of orky potions actually sounds like a great way to keep orcs in your game after fourth level. Um, Instead of you're only encountering third and fourth level monsters, so orcs, goblins, kobolds, lizard men are off the table, off the random encounter charts. A nice way to keep them still in the game. Then there was this chapter called Rogue Magic, which is kind of interesting. Basically, it was the equivalent of the easiest way I could describe it is giving thieves built-in cantrips where they just somehow know these magical spells or abilities that they don't know why they know them. They just know them, and obviously it's as rare as psionics, or maybe not as rare, but just something like that. For the most part, most of the thieves that have ever run in my campaigns have either been multi-class non-humans, or just straight thieves who were always around a player character party who never really needed it. But for those occasions when maybe you have a third level thief that's going on a solo mission and could use a little boost, it's something to think about if you're going to have especially like a party of thieves, which I don't recommend. Um, there's no honor among thieves, and that's just a great way to get the party to kill themselves uh, by each other's weapons. Then there's obviously a chapter on new wizardly magic, new priestly magic, and new druidic magic, all of which, um, David A. Hargrave had some of the most original spells for the time, and obviously so many of them were swiped by other game companies and other publishers and things like that. But back in the day, while he did use and maybe even borrow spells from the big guys, Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe Tunnels and Trolls and things like that of the time, uh, you know that's inevitable. I mean, there's always going to be a fireball spell in every game. There's always going to be something like magic missile and lightning bolt, wall of fire, but he would always go to great lengths to make those kinds of spells his own, especially like web spells, things like that, which I thought was a great idea. It's the most, one of the most overlooked spells, that being web, but then throwing other properties to that spell, I thought was, a great way to, borrow somebody else's idea and improve upon it. And, the same could be said for the druid and priestly magic in here. So many different things he thought of were, taken from him and then, put in other games all over the place. And I think he deserves, credit where credit is due. Then I guess this is another chapter on prismatic walls. Possibly one of his favorite things, I think, from as much as he wrote about them. Prismatic walls, are kind of based on the prismatic spheres, prismatic wall spell, being very high level spells in the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where if you walk through this wall, because of its color, the color would be like a warning. If you walk through purple, this is going to happen to you. If you walk through this color, this is going to happen to you. But he really expanded upon it, basically taking every color of the rainbow, even black and silver and gold and things like that, and giving them some sort of nasty penalty for walking through them, if not just outright death, as well as using illusionary walls better than anybody else. So few people actually, test every wall to see if it's real. I realize that the dungeon master should kind of take that into account when players are saying, okay, we searched for secret doors. Obviously, if they really were searching, they'd find those illusionary walls. But oftentimes, depending on the shape of the room, you could easily hide things with illusionary walls without the players, even walking within 20 feet of said wall. So he really, had some great insights when it comes to, pretty much all things illusionary. Then Gladiators. This was probably my favorite chapter. He really did his homework when it comes to gladiators, both professional and unwilling gladiators, and the different rules, and not just inside the arena, but rules for running and playing gladiators sort of things. So many times an NPC, used to be a gladiator, but now he's joined the party as a henchman of some sort. This really gives you a lot of meat to work with, a lot of ideas, and how cool is it to throw the player characters into an arena against their will because they you know were captured and or broke the law, and this is the punishment, and you know kind of like a side quest, if you will. For the next couple of nights, you guys are going to be stuck fighting in the arena until you win X number of battles and earn your freedom. Obviously, in this particular scenario, in this book, you really had to win a lot of battles, which pretty much made it, almost an impossibility of ever gaining your freedom. But, you know, nipping down those requirements, say half a dozen battles and you've earned your freedom, for especially lesser crimes, could be very interesting and a great way to, just force feed the characters some combat and some XP, especially if they're allowed to fight together as a group. That would be kind of interesting. I realize, unlikely. Probably going to throw the wizard in to the arena against an ogre, and everybody's just going to laugh as the ogre rips the magic user apart. But, throwing them together might be, a little bit more fun, at least during the first one or two gladiator, fights, until they've, earned enough XP to maybe go up one level while they're, in jail. But then again, depending on how you run leveling up, I'm pretty brutal when it comes to that. I always require the training that's listed to actually get all the benefits from your level. I know a lot of dungeon masters. Up your third level, okay, roll your d6 or whatever, your third level now. I don't do that. Then the mini drax, which were basically a cross between very young dragons and pseudo dragons and big lizards. I suppose if you want your game to be very reptilian in nature when it comes to the foes they fight, and you don't really want to face them off with some of the younger dragons, which I almost never did. It always seemed just too easy for players to encounter anything other than the upper two or three categories of ages when it comes to dragons. They were just too vulnerable against a party of 4 or 6 players against one adult dragon. It just seemed like pretty unfair no matter what magic you gave them, unless it was like teleport or invisibility, and then it just gets the heck out of dodge because it's just not a fair encounter. So having lesser dragon-like things, I suppose that could be what some dungeon masters are looking for. And then of course, the last real chapter is new monsters, and again more monsters from the King of Monsters. I'm not going to give you any spoilers. There's so many monsters that David A Hargrave came up with that were as original as the Beholder, if not more so. The Beholder, is obviously the king of made-up fantasy game monsters, hands down, right, Lilac? And he was just always coming up with new things. I realized some of them, were a lot of times just crossbreeds, which were interesting crossbreeds, but then there were things like the air shark and the war wheel we did earlier this month, that were just all his. He like I said, he's the king of monsters, and he definitely deserves that crown. And I can't wait to go read the monster and treasure book, but I want to get through these for you guys first. And then of course at the very end of the book there's another sneak preview on. Did I pass it? The World Book of Kaz. I think it's only 4 or 5 pages. Yeah, 3 or 4 pages. And, again, I can't wait to read the whole book in its entirety. But, if you guys don't have it, you can, read I think most of these volumes have a a small snippet of the world of Cause, so you can get a feel for it. I'm hoping that the 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 Book of Cause, the big one, has a lot of maps in it, because I really don't even know, other than that map up there on the wall, what the rest of the world looks like. And hopefully you guys over at Emperor's Choice will really, when you start pumping out the new stuff, really put that into play. I'm looking forward to everything that has to do with Arduin and the world itself, not just the monsters and the treasures and the spells and the character classes, but the different countries, if you will. So with all that said and done, hope you guys enjoyed the review. Hope you guys will come back this Sunday when we have another painting video. And until then, have a great weekend. The little guy and I are quite busy, and hope you guys are too. And we'll see you real soon. Bye.
Ja, misschien van een zo'n jou. Ja, er veel. Oei, de. Och, zo aan ik. Er gaat hier, ja,